Oh, fuck me, dude. Ronda and Gina. How fucking, whoever thought about that, man? They're going to be half naked? I guess I will be half naked. Might be making it a little better. I don't know. Do you guys care about Gina and Ronda? No? No, you know what he gives a fuck. Maybe if you put some oil on it, you know? Do some dollar bills, people might give a fuck. But really, like, not many people give a fuck about women's MMA in general, you know? It's like the WNBA. Everyone's like, oh, like, no one gives a fuck about women's sports. You take the weakest, softest motherfucker here, and you guys would beat up Amanda Nunes. Like, fucking the fat guy in the Hawaiian shirt, no offense, dude, I like you, but, like, you fuck up Amanda Nunes any day of the week. We got to remember what women excel at. Having kids, being mothers, making food, cleaning the house. Problem is, we've empowered them too much to ruin society.
I was 9 months pregnant, and I saw a video of Gina Carano giving an interview, and she didn't look good. She gained like an unhealthy amount of weight, and my first thought was like, oh my God, what can I do? What can I do to help? And the reason why I had that thought was because she's the one woman, not only in MMA, that doesn't owe me a damn thing, but that I owe immensely. And I'm always trying to look out of what I could do for her. And, you know, she's, her family owns Caesar Palace in Rebel Oil. Like, there's nothing I could really do for her, except for when I was in a similar spot, when I was, you know, depressed and gave up in the world and inadvertently gave up on myself. What I needed was a goal and something to reignite my passion again. And I always said that Gina is the one person I'd come back to fight for. And I thought, you know what, like she needs this. She needs this fight. And the more that I thought about it, I was like, you know what, I need this. I really need this fight. And I reached out to Dana and asked him if he would be interested in it. And it didn't exactly work out with the UFC, but it led us to here today.
In the MMA business. Now let me break that down for you. They're going to do a card, they're going to put in a cage, they're going to put it on Netflix, right? Boom, boom, boom. So now you've got a supporting cast. And Jake Paul works with a number of MMA fighters already. He works with Anderson Silva, doing some boxing, but Anderson would like to do MMA. He works with Tyron Woodley, doing some boxing, but Tyron would like to do MMA. Just by example, like, I don't know where that's going to go or who else he's going to find or how serious he's going to take the card. Also, when he finds these athletes, is he going to sign them? Is it a one-night event? You've got to understand a massive difference in this business, and everybody that gets into the business.
Dana White is absolutely losing his mind right now, and it's not because of Jake Paul or some contract dispute. It's because Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano just showed up on Netflix for a fantasy fight, and this is his worst nightmare coming true. We're talking about two of his biggest legends, two women he personally built into superstars, now generating massive buzz and potentially massive revenue completely outside his control. This isn't just about one fight, this is about the entire foundation of his empire being challenged. Because when you really break it down, Dana doesn't just promote fights, he owns narratives. He controls legacies. And what's happening right now on Netflix is the equivalent of someone taking his most prized possessions and putting them on display in someone else's museum.
You can do a different night. The same thing, you can reproduce it. It is sustainable. Boxing is very unsustainable, but what do you have to sustain when you don't have a set program? What do you have to sustain when you're only doing it twice a year? That's where the difference from a business standpoint comes from a promotion versus the big fight business. So is Jake Paul now into MMA? Or is Jake Paul in the big fight business? That's very different.
Here's what makes this absolutely brutal for Dana. He spent years, millions of dollars, and countless resources building Ronda Rousey into the biggest female combat sports star on the planet. Same with Gina Carano back in the day. These weren't just fighters to him, they were investments. They were his creations. He controlled their stories, their rivalries, their comebacks, their retirements. Every single narrative beat that made them legends happened under his watch in his octagon through his pay-per-view model. And now Netflix swoops in and basically says, hey, remember those stars you built? We're gonna use them for content now. That's not just a business move, that's a declaration of war.
Another venue, you don't have to do that. You can just bring it in one night. You can play a game of checkers and do real well. So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, that's a very formidable MVP, Netflix, that's very formidable. Now, what do you do with the actual match? right? I mean, what do you do with the actual match? Does it matter that nobody wanted to see this? Competitively, it's just not the kind of thing that you would see in the UFC. But
here's where it gets absolutely wild. This Netflix situation exposes something Dana has been desperately trying to hide for years. The fact that his biggest stars don't actually need him anymore once they reach a certain level of fame. Think about it. Ronda Rousey transcended MMA. She became a mainstream celebrity, a Hollywood actress, a cultural phenomenon. Gina Carano had her own Hollywood career, her own following, her own brand recognition. These women built something bigger than just fighting, and that something exists completely independent of the UFC. That terrifies Dana because it shows every current UFC star exactly what's possible outside his system.
if we're doing big fights, there's a very different perspective. Like Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson broke the internet. Literally. The streaming of the product was shutting down because so many people were watching it. By the way, I found a workaround on that. Go to a tablet as opposed to television if that happens to you next time. I watched the whole thing perfectly clear, no interruptions. Now, I share this because I am very curious what the rest of the card is going to look like. Truly. And the risk in the gamble is tremendous. Like if you do a card the way that boxing does it, which is you've got your main event.
Now listen to this part, because this is where the psychology gets really interesting. Dana White has built his entire identity around being the kingmaker of combat sports. He's the guy who takes unknowns and turns them into superstars. He's the puppet master pulling all the strings. But when Netflix can just grab two of his former stars and create a massive spectacle without him, it reveals the brutal truth that maybe he's not as indispensable as he thought. Maybe these fighters' star power was always their own, and he was just the platform they used to showcase it. That's an ego-shattering realization for someone who sees himself as the center of the combat sports universe.
One of them pulls out, and then you're just stuck. And it's a big risk, but I do believe that Gina and Ronda are fairly reliable. I just don't think that's the story. I think the story that's being missed is that Jake Paul, through teaming up with Netflix, just became a very formidable opponent if they're in the MMA business, as opposed to the big fight business. And I think that people are largely missing what is happening there. I'll be very interested what the reaction is. I'll be interested in Saturday, May 6th.
And get this, the financial implications are staggering. We're not talking about some small indie promotion putting on a local show. This is Netflix, with their global reach, their massive subscriber base, their ability to create cultural moments that dominate social media for weeks. If this Rousey versus Carano fantasy fight generates the kind of buzz and viewership numbers that Netflix is probably expecting, it proves that major combat sports content can thrive completely outside the traditional pay-per-view model that Dana has spent decades perfecting. That's not just competition, that's evolution, and Dana's business model might be getting left behind.
Very interesting, because that does open themselves, right? I mean, which business are they in and what kind of fight do they have coming in front of them? I think that's the real story here. Ronda versus Carano. All right. Jake Paul putting on him.
Here's the kicker, though. This situation creates a dangerous precedent that could completely reshape how fighters think about their careers. Right now, every UFC fighter dreams of building enough star power to negotiate better deals with Dana. But what if they start dreaming of building enough star power to leave Ronda entirely? What if they realize that the real money, the real creative control, the real ownership of their narrative exists outside the octagon? Suddenly, every contract negotiation becomes a potential exodus. Every superstar becomes a flight risk, and Dana's iron grip on the sport starts looking a lot less secure. But wait, it gets worse for Dana. Because this isn't just about losing control of past stars, it's about losing the ability to control future stars. When current UFC fighters see Dana and Dana's getting massive attention and presumably massive paychecks for a Netflix spectacle, they start asking questions. Why am I grinding through brutal training camps, dangerous weight cuts, and career-threatening injuries for a fraction of what these women are making for what's essentially entertainment? Why am I letting Dana own my story when I could own it myself? Those are the kinds of questions that keep promoters up at night. Hold up, did you catch what just happened here? Netflix didn't just steal two fighters, they stole the entire concept of what a superfight can be. They proved that you don't need rankings, you don't need title implications, You don't even need active fighters to create compelling combat sports content. You just need star power and storytelling. That's a massive shift in how we think about combat sports entertainment. And it's a shift that completely bypasses everything Dana has built his business on. No athletic commissions, no drug testing protocols, no championship lineages, just pure entertainment value and celebrity appeal. Now here's where the psychological warfare gets absolutely insane. Every time someone talks about this Netflix fight, every time it trends on social media, every time it generates headlines, it's a reminder to Dana that his former stars are thriving without him. It's like watching your ex succeed with someone new, except your ex is a multi-million-dollar business asset and the new person is a streaming giant with unlimited resources. The success of this spectacle doesn't just hurt Dana financially, it hurts him personally, because it suggests that maybe his role in these women's success was smaller than he thought. Let me tell you something that nobody else is talking about. This Netflix move is actually brilliant strategic warfare against the entire traditional combat sports industry. They're not just competing for viewers, they're competing for talent. They're showing fighters that there's life after traditional promotions, that there are new ways to monetize their fame and fighting skills. Netflix has the technology, the global distribution, the production values, and most importantly, the willingness to pay top dollar for content that drives subscriptions. That's a completely different business model than pay-per-view, and it might be a better one. Here's what's really eating Dana alive, though: the timing of all this. The UFC just went through this massive deal with ESPN. They're constantly fighting with fighters over pay. They're dealing with criticism about fighter treatment. And then Netflix comes along and basically demonstrates an alternative model where fighters might have more control and better compensation. It's like having someone show up to your neighborhood and build a better version of your house right next door. Suddenly, everyone's comparing, everyone's asking questions, and your monopoly starts looking a lot less monopolistic. But there's something way bigger happening behind the scenes that most people aren't seeing. This isn't just about Ronda and Gina. This is about Netflix testing the waters for a full-scale invasion of combat sports. Think about it. They've got the money to outbid traditional promotions for top talent. They've got the global platform to make any fighter a worldwide star overnight. They've got the creative freedom to present fights in ways that traditional sports broadcasting never could. And they've got the subscriber model that doesn't rely on individual pay-per-view sales. That's not just competition for Dana, that's potentially the end of his entire business model. And you know what's wild? Dana can't even really fight back against this effectively. What's he gonna do? Sue Netflix for hiring former UFC fighters? He's gonna look petty and controlling. Is he gonna badmouth Ronda and Gina publicly? He's gonna look like a bitter ex-boss who can't handle his former employees' success. His usual tactics of intimidation and public pressure don't work against a company like Netflix that doesn't need his approval or cooperation for anything. He's essentially powerless to stop this, and that powerlessness is probably driving him absolutely crazy. The real nightmare scenario for Dana is that this Netflix experiment works so well that it becomes a blueprint for other major streaming platforms. Imagine if Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Disney Plus, and HBO Max all start developing their own combat sports content with former UFC stars. Suddenly, the UFC isn't competing with other fight promotions. They're competing with the entire entertainment industry for talent. And let's be honest, the entertainment industry has way deeper pockets and way more creative freedom than traditional sports promotions. Here's the brutal truth that Dana is probably trying not to think about. The fighters who made him rich and powerful are now proving that they can make themselves rich and powerful without him. That's not just a business problem, that's an existential crisis. Because if his biggest success stories don't need him anymore, what does that say about his value proposition to current and future fighters? Why should the next generation of combat sports stars tie themselves to his system, when they can see clear examples of alternatives that might be more lucrative and more creatively fulfilling? So there you have it. Dana White isn't just mad about a Netflix fight, he's watching his entire model of control and ownership get challenged by forces he can't intimidate or outspend. This is about power, legacy, and the brutal reality that in the entertainment business, star power ultimately belongs to the stars, not the people who claim to have created them. And honestly, this might just be the beginning of a complete transformation in how combat sports business works. So here's my question for you, drop it in the comments. Do Do you think traditional fight promotions can survive the streaming revolution, or are we watching the beginning of the end for the old guard? If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell because this war between traditional combat sports and streaming platforms is just getting started. I'll see you in the next one. But here's where this gets absolutely nuclear, and I guarantee Dana White is having emergency meetings about this right now. Netflix isn't just creating a one-off spectacle. They're building a proof of concept that could completely demolish the pay-per-view industry forever. Think about the math here for a second. Netflix has over 230 million subscribers worldwide. If even a fraction of those subscribers tune into this Rousey versus Carano fight, we're talking about viewership numbers that dwarf most UFC pay-per-views. And here's the kicker. Those viewers aren't paying an additional $60 to $80 on top of their monthly subscription. They're getting premium combat sports content as part of a package they're already paying for. That's not just a different business model, that's a better business model for consumers, and Dana knows it. Now let me blow your mind with something even crazier. Netflix has data on every single one of their subscribers. They know what you watch, when you watch it, how long you watch it, what you skip, what you rewatch, what makes you cancel your subscription, and what makes you keep it. Imagine applying that level of data analytics to combat sports content. They could literally engineer fights, storylines, and presentation styles based on what their algorithms tell them audiences want to see. Meanwhile, Dana is still operating on gut, instinct, and traditional television metrics from the Stone Age. Netflix could revolutionize not just how fights are distributed, but how they're conceived, marketed, and produced from the ground up. But wait, there's something even more terrifying for Dana that nobody's talking about. Netflix has relationships with every major celebrity, athlete, and influencer on the planet through their original content deals. They could literally create crossover combat sports content that the UFC could never dream of. Imagine Netflix producing a fight between a retired UFC legend and a professional wrestler, with cameos from their biggest movie stars, promoted through their most popular TV shows, and integrated into their overall content ecosystem. The UFC operates in a silo Netflix operates in the entire entertainment universe. Here's where the psychological warfare gets absolutely brutal. Every single current UFC fighter is watching this Netflix situation unfold, and they're doing math in their heads. They're looking at their UFC contracts, their pay-per-view points, their sponsorship restrictions, their media obligations, and then they're looking at what Netflix potentially offers: creative control, global distribution, better compensation, and ownership of their own narrative. The UFC's entire system is built on fighters believing they have no viable alternatives. Netflix just showed them they might have the best alternative in the history of combat sports. And get this, Netflix doesn't just have money, they have something way more valuable in today's market: cultural influence. When Netflix decides something is important, it becomes part of the global conversation. Their algorithm pushes content to hundreds of millions of people across dozens of countries simultaneously. They create cultural moments that trend worldwide and dominate social media for weeks. The UFC has to fight for every bit of mainstream attention they get. Netflix can manufacture mainstream attention with the push of a button. That's not just power, that's the kind of power that makes traditional media companies obsolete overnight. But here's the part that's probably giving Dana nightmares. Netflix has proven they're willing to throw absolutely insane amounts of money at content that drives subscriptions. We're talking about a company that spent over $15 billion on original content in a single year. They paid hundreds of millions for comedy specials, documentary series, and exclusive rights to shows and movies. If they decide combat sports is a strategic priority, they could outspend the entire traditional fight promotion industry combined without even blinking. Dana's operating with ESPN money. Netflix is operating with, we're going to dominate global entertainment money. Now here's where it gets absolutely wild from a business strategy perspective. Netflix doesn't need to make money directly from individual fights like the UFC does with pay-per-views. They just need combat sports content that keeps people subscribed and attracts new subscribers. That completely changes the economics of fighter pay, production values, and creative risk-taking. They could literally afford to lose money on individual fight events if those events drive overall platform growth. That's a level of financial flexibility that traditional fight promotions could never match, and it opens up possibilities for fighter compensation that could make UFC contracts look like charity donations. Here's something even more insidious that Dana probably hasn't even fully realized yet. Netflix is training an entire generation of viewers to expect premium content as part of their monthly entertainment budget, not as expensive individual purchases. These viewers are getting used to binge-watching entire seasons of shows, discovering new content through algorithmic recommendations, and having unlimited access to entertainment without additional fees. When these viewers encounter the UFC's pay-per-view model, it feels outdated, expensive, and consumer-hostile by comparison. Netflix isn't just competing with the UFC for viewers, they're conditioning viewers to expect a completely different value proposition. But wait, it gets worse. Netflix has global licensing deals, international distribution networks, and cultural localization capabilities that the UFC has been trying to build for decades. They can simultaneously promote a fight to American subscribers through English-language content, to European subscribers through localized programming, and to Asian markets through region-specific influencers and celebrities. They can create promotional content that feels native to dozens of different cultures and languages simultaneously. The UFC is still figuring out how to properly promote events in international markets. Netflix has already solved that problem across every form of entertainment. Here's the nuclear option that Netflix could deploy that would absolutely destroy Dana's business model overnight. They could create an exclusive combat sports league with better fighter pay, better production values, global distribution, and integration with their entire entertainment ecosystem. Imagine Netflix signing the top 50 combat sports athletes in the world to exclusive multi-year deals that include not just fighting, but appearances in Netflix original series, documentaries about their lives, reality shows about their training, and crossover content with Netflix's other properties. Suddenly being a Netflix fighter isn't just about combat sports, it's about becoming a multimedia entertainment star. And here's what's absolutely brilliant about Netflix's positioning. They don't have to play by any of the traditional rules that govern combat sports promotions. They're not a fight promotion, they're an entertainment platform. They can present combat sports content in ways that traditional promotions never could, as part of reality series, as documentary content, as scripted entertainment with real fighting elements, or as completely new hybrid formats that don't exist yet. They have creative freedom that the UFC could never match, because they're not bound by the same industry conventions and regulatory expectations. The timing of this Netflix move is also absolutely perfect from a market disruption perspective. The UFC is dealing with ongoing criticism about fighter pay, athlete treatment, and monopolistic business practices. Traditional pay-per-view numbers have been inconsistent. Streaming is dominating every other form of entertainment consumption. And there's a whole generation of potential combat sports fans who have never paid for pay-per-view and never will. Netflix is positioning themselves to capture all of that market dissatisfaction and generational shift in one strategic move. But here's the psychological aspect that's probably eating Dana alive. This Netflix situation proves that his former stars don't just survive without him, they thrive. And they're not just thriving financially, they're thriving creatively. They have control over their narratives, their presentation, their creative direction, and their business partnerships. Everything that Dana spent years convincing fighters they couldn't have outside his system, Netflix is offering on a silver platter. That's not just business competition, that's a complete invalidation of his core value proposition.